Hi, Kathy here from Kathy's Cute Creations. Well, the day has finally arrived. We are going to be assembling our lap quilt called Fir Good Measure from the Fort Worth Fabric Studios. Let me tell you what you're going to do first. You're going to count your blocks. Make sure you have 20 of them for starters. You're going to iron your blocks. This is where we're going to measure them, but I want you to iron them first so they're nice and smoothed out. If you've had them wrinkled, folded up somewhere, doesn't make any difference where you had them. If you've already made sure that they're squared up to 12.5 by 12.5, you don't need to do this part. Now I'm going to show you how I take I'm calling them the red squares, and how I iron it before I square it up, so you have an idea. Now the reason that I use water instead of starch is that water actually will make it a little bit bigger. If you go and measure your blocks and they're small, and I say small by 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, that kind of thing, then this will make them a little bit bigger. But the first thing you want to do is look at your squares, find the one that to your eye is the smallest one, measure it so that you know what you're dealing with. Let's say that you measured and it's an entire inch off, and I'm talking about all the way around. So when you measure it, it is 11.5 by 11.5. All right, first off, it's not going to become 12.5 by 12.5 unless you take it apart and you have used a 1/4 inch seam and you use a smaller seam. Don't bother. Take the 11.5 and we're going to use that as your rule of thumb for this lap quilt only, so that all of your blocks equal 11.5 by 11.5. All right, the object of this part right here is just to make sure that all your blocks are the same size before you put it together. Don't try to force a 11.5 inch block if you've got one and all the rest of them are 12.5, because it'll skew your quilt unless you're going to be adding fabric to it all the way around to make it 12.5 by 12.5. All right, that's your call if you want to do that. I would go down to 11.5 by 11.5. I would square every one of them up, downsized. Nobody's going to know the difference that your quilt is a different size. And I would be focusing on, when it comes to the trees, I would make sure that when I did my 11.5, I did not cut off the tip of the trees. And I can show you real quick what I'm talking about with that before we get over here and we iron. So here's my block, and as you can tell, I've taken it. Now this is a 12.5 inch square, but here, right at this mark, is 11.5. So let's say this is how big your quilt is. So I would start at this end, and this is where I would put my ruler, because this is what you're looking at right here. You don't want to lose the tip. Then I would go down here and I would chop it off. Then when it comes time to do the top up here, instead of doing it like this at 11.5, okay, there's our 12, so 11.5, then what you're going to do is you're going to come down like that and do it on both sides. Okay, so that when you come down here, you take a little bit off each end, so that it's going to equal the same thing going back and forth. That's if you have to cut it down to 11.5. And keep in mind, to be correct about it, you can always take a pencil and mark it for where you're going to cut it. Now I'm going to take you over here to the iron, and I'm going to show you how I iron my red square. All right, here it is, and I have it laid out. So I take my bottle of spray here, and all I do is just spray it. See, you can see the spray coming out a little bit. I don't have to saturate it till it's wet. I just need to spray it so that it's damp. And then what I do is I take my iron, I start here in the middle, so you know I'm getting the middle block, and I go outward. See the steam coming off? And then I do the same thing here. Let me back up a little bit. Outward. This way I'm making it evenly when it spreads out. Alrighty, I haven't gone to the right or the left until I've gone each corner, spreading it out. And then I take it over here. This is my cutting surface. I lay it down. First thing I do is put my ruler on it. And I have a 12.5-inch ruler. So I just lay it on it. Make sure it's 12.5. So it is off a little bit here in the corner. See just that little bit right there? So I'll take that off. It's a little bit over here, just a tad right here. And I'll take that off right there. And that's all I'm going to do. I don't need to do anything else to this one. And then this one's completed. Then I put it in a stack. I put all of these in the stack and all the trees in a stack before I build my sections. And I'll show you that next. Let me go ahead and cut this and get it finished. What I do is I take my paper out here and I look at my top row, and it has the two, I call this the two sets of trees, the red block, the two sets of trees, and the red block. So I take them and I stack them up. So here's the first. I did the trees. I did the red block. I did the trees. And I did the red block. I took this stack. And I did the next stack. And I did them. And as you can see, here's a stack. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one slipped a little bit. And 5. Because there's 5 stacks. Let me see here. Here we go. So I got 5 of them here. And I'm going to sew all of these together first. So you're going to put, let me show you here by the picture. We're going to sew this one to this one. And then we're going to sew these two together. And then we're going to sew these two sets together. That's going to give us one row. Then I'm going to repeat the same thing. I'm going to sew these two. Then I'm going to sew these two. And then I'm going to sew these two sets together. This way I don't get them messed up. Being new, normally you could just lay them out and chain stitch them. But if you're not used to it, the next thing you know, you've got them out of order. So let's just do it so that it's super duper easy, and we'll get all 5 of these rows finished, and then we'll put them together by rows. Now this is where you're going to put a brand new needle in if you need it. You're going to make sure that you've got a couple of bobbins already wound, so you don't have to stop midstream and rewind your bobbins. And I'm going to sew this on a 2.5-inch length, just like I always do. So let me take them all over there in front of my sewing machine, and we'll get started. So here's what I do. I take my picture and I set it up there so I can refer to it every now and then. Here's all of my stacks right here, because they're easier for me to take them. And I'll just grab the first 2. And we'll put those together. And I'm going to move these 2 away from the stack here, just to keep it straight, because that's what I'm working on. And I don't want to accidentally grab something else by mistake. Here's my 2. This is the first 2 pinned. And then here's the next 2 sitting right down here at the bottom. And you shouldn't have a problem because now they're squared up. So you should be able to pin on the left, go over to the right and pin. That's what I did. And then I just pinned every now and then. So I pinned 1 here, 1 in the middle, and then 1 here. And only because it's going up the other direction. And then we'll chain stitch the first one and the second one since I've got them both pinned. Now, if you can keep track of all of these sets, in other words, you have a design board or you have a large area, you could sit and actually pin all of these sets together and then just chain stitch them. I'm only going to do 2 at a time, and that's it. They will not fit on my design board because it is too full and I don't have a big enough area. Just going to take our time. We're going to do 1/4 of an inch. And if you needed to clean out your sewing machine underneath the bed here, then you need to do that before you start on this project so you don't have any issues. I cleaned mine out because I'm in the middle of some other projects and it got a little bit dirty down there. So I know mine's cleaned out. I hope that everybody's enjoyed making this, and it's a shame that if you watch Yvette's live on Wednesday evenings, she has decided to no longer do these. She's going to be doing some other projects. Pin this one the same way where I started here on the left. And I'm always going to do this side, which has more things to be careful and watch for. The other side, let me flip it a little bit, hopefully. There you go. See, it doesn't have any seams or anything. So you want to do it where the seams are at so they don't get flipped on you or anything. And here it is laying right here on the table. So it's the 2 blocks each. Make sure your blocks aren't upside down when you put these 2 together also, all right? You don't want that to happen. I got this little bit of bunch up here on my table. Now I know that the Fort Worth Fabric Studios normally had a small table topper for Halloween, and then they had the Christmas, but I think they're going to do some other things throughout the year. I think they are expanding a little bit, so we'll see what that is, and as soon as I get some kind of an announcement, I'll let you guys know what's going on in case you want to follow along and get a kit or build yourself a stash or something like that. What I've done is I've laid it out here on the table as I put this together. So here's all 4 blocks right here. And then I'll just do my second row, my third, my fourth, my fifth, and I'm going to lay them all out here. And then I'll assemble each one of these rolls. So let's go ahead and chain stitch these all together and pin them as you go. And I'll do the same thing and we'll get them all done. Now you notice that I'm doing the white side, or the tree side, let's put it that way, not the white side. Because these pieces that flipped are more cantankerous, whoops, than the other side, the red blocks. So that's the purpose of this. But you don't have to do it if you don't want to. I just did it for the convenience of it. Made it a lot easier to see all these seams. Now here's my next block. I'm going to bring it up here. This is the other half of it. Remember, the reason I do this is to keep this seam straight. And you can tell if it's off and it doesn't want to stay straight based by the way it looks. Now you guys go ahead and chain stitch all of yours, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do the rows, okay? This is what you should have. You should have all of the rows done. This is the 5th row right here. I haven't marked it yet because I'm going to show you that when I get to it. I did mark them on the other ones. This is row 1 and 2 pinned together. This is row 3 and 4, and then this is row 5 that's not pinned. We're going to do this first, and then we're going to do the last one. So let me take it over here and we're going to chain stitch it. If you remember in previous videos, I always mark the tip up here so that we do not accidentally cut off the nose of the goose. This is a goose square right here. I'm not square, excuse me. This is a goose rectangle right here in both of these. So let's go over here and we're going to sew them together. We're going to be really careful when we go across this. Now, if for some reason you've pinned it, your fabric on this side, then when you come up against there, you won't see it. If you want, just for this one piece, you can flip it over, sew it on this side, turn it back around, and continue sewing on this side. All right? Or if you like to do it blind and you've never had a problem with it, then by all means, go ahead and do it. Or you can match up your top 2 seams up here and just measure down 1/4 inch and you won't clip it off. So let's take this over here to the sewing machine and let's continue sewing it together. Now when I was ironing these, when I started with row 1, all of my seams, the joined seams of the blocks, I made them go to the left. So that meant that when I started my next row, I had to go to the right so that I could get these seams to nestle with one another. Y'all are going to need to do the same thing. Otherwise, you're going to have an issue when it comes to putting all these blocks together, because you'll have too much bulk and thickness in that one area where they come together. And you don't want to do that. You want to make this easy. This hasn't taken any time at all to put together. It's all come together really, really good. When we get finished sewing this one area, we're going to flip it over and we're going to take a look at it to make sure we have it correctly. Let me go ahead and go down to this block. I'm going to open this up and take a look if I've gone enough. Let's see if I can see it. No, I can't. All right, let's just grab thread. Let's take a look at it. All right, let me show it to you here. See where we did not cut the tip of the nose off because we have it marked. Now remember, this is the friction pin, so this pin will disappear once it's ironed on. And you won't see that mark. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew right over the spot that I sewed before. Wait a minute, my pen just came out over here on another piece. No problem with going over that exact same seam. It doesn't hurt a thing. It just locks it in, that's all. You don't have to backstitch. It's as if you sewed it twice. Try not to go over your pins, especially if you have one of these electronic sewing machines. It can knock your entire machine out of balance. If it's an older machine, it could probably kill your motherboard, just so you know. And when you don't have any pins on the sections that are flipped up like this, you want to make sure that it doesn't flip over the other direction as you're sewing it. Just take your time when you come to that area. And this is a bit heavy, just so you know. You might have to have it in your lap. All right, we're coming up to the other nose of the goose. I'm going to go ahead and go over this seam right here before I take that apart and take a look at it. Take a look at this one here. Yep, looks good. I'll hold it up there for you. See? That one looks good too. All right, put it back underneath here. Remember, if you've got that knee lift on your sewing machine, this would be a good time to use it. Big help when you got to take your pins out. Don't have to keep lifting your foot. If you have a manual thing that you've got to lift in the back to lift your foot up, this is electronic, so it lifts it for me. Oh, it's telling me my bobbin's almost out. Let's take a look at it. No, it doesn't look like it's out. I'll just go slower so the little notice doesn't constantly click on. I know it's annoying, but gosh. It looks like it's still got the bobbin in it, although it's telling me it's slow. Sometimes I think that you waste too much thread when you take it out exactly when it says it's got an issue. I still got some in there. It'll get me through the tail end of this. I can still see it in there. I'll show you how much as soon as I get done here, how much I have left. See, I still had a little bit left. If you can see it there. That's how much I had left while it's telling me, you're out, you're out, you're out. Well, I'm not out. All right, let me get my new bobbin in because I do have a new one. I was prepared. I had two of them I was starting with today. Okay, so I went in and I put the first 2 rows that are sewn together up here on the board. I won't even be able to get the next 2 because I don't have enough room. But I wanted to put the first 2 before we sew the second, before we sew the 3rd and 4th row together. After I get all of these sewn, I will have my granddaughter hold it up over the stairs because it is so big. It's even bigger than what I think of as a lap throw. I never think of them as this big, actually. I think of them smaller. Got my bobbin in there. Now here's what I was talking about, where I've got to watch this one here so it doesn't accidentally go up. There we go. So I am going to quilt this myself. And so what I'm going to do, I've been thinking about it. Because I know that all the new people that have never quilted yet, you can't just jump into something like this and quilt it. You'll get too frustrated. You won't know where to turn. It'll just be too much for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to quilt a 10-inch square. That's for starters. We're going to take that 10-inch square and we're going to turn it into a bow cozy. Now I need to look to see if I have enough fabric to make 2 10-inch squares out of this fabric, but I'll have to get into my stash and see. I don't know if I've got it or not. I'll look at that first. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and I'll just get some Christmas fabric and we'll make it out of that. Now, we're not going to build the square. I just want to cut the 2 10-inch squares on their own. And then you're going to need some batting, and I'll give you the sizes and everything of all this stuff. And then you're going to be able to do 2 things in one, because first you're going to learn how to do some quilting, but then you're going to also turn it into a project. That's going to be starting out small and then get a little bit bigger. This way it won't be so overwhelming. And then we'll do something else that's just a little bit bigger and a little bit different so that you have an idea. Until we get to the point where we can get to something big like this. And whenever you feel like you're ready to jump in and do this, then by all means, if you're ahead of me showing it, then go ahead and do that. But if you already know how to do that kind of stuff, you can do it. You don't have to wait for me. It's just that I don't have a long arm. I don't have, I can't think of the one that you sit down at. There's one where you can sit. Even if I had it, even if I could afford to buy it, I don't have the room for it. I'd have to get rid of something in order to put it in this house. So I'll just use my sewing machine. Oops, I forgot to look at that tree just a minute ago, but I'll look at it here in a minute. I'll just get done and do it. Worst case scenario is you got to take it out and move your seam. And I need to, I don't know how I missed my pen right there. All right, let's take that out a minute. I need to fix this area right here. All right, I went ahead and I checked my trees while I was at it, but they're okay. All right, I don't know how that, I didn't get a pin on there. I don't know what I was doing. I must have got distracted or something. Okay, let's get on down here. Now when I iron these, I take them all and I make the seam, this seam here, which is, let me back it up a little bit. So the seam on the block, the top block here, now this is upside down, so let me flip it over. Okay, so this is my top block. Let me back up just a little bit for y'all. Alrighty, so this is the top one. And this is going to get connected to the other set. This seam here needs to be ironed. The seam is going upward. I always make it go upward. So to give you an idea, let's flip it over so you can see the back of it. This is the fabric that's going to be flipped over. So when you flip it over and iron it, it's going to go like that. So this seam is going to go up towards the top of the fabric, or up towards the top of the quilt. Don't forget, when you're up at the ironing board, first you take your seam like this and you press it because you're trying to relax this seam before you fold it up. Now this is what I was talking about when I said, and I'll have to iron that a little bit, but here is the tip, which is the nose of the, let me get you a little closer. So that's the tip. And I have my pen right in the tip right here. This is where this seam crosses over this seam. All right, so that's the tip of the bird. This is a friction pen, one type of friction pen. It's erasable, that's why there's an eraser on it. I take my ruler and I go across the tip of this right here. Put a little dot right here where the actual tip is, where the two pieces of thread right here cross, right there. Then I put a mark there, and I want to stay on the mark, or I want to go closer to the edge of the fabric. I do not want to go in towards the fabric because I don't want to chop the nose off. So that's what I do, is I mark it right here. So when I come along sewing my 1/4 inch, I'm going to make sure that I stay on this line. I don't come over this away. It's okay to go this away because you're putting more fabric on the head of or on the nose of the goose. So let's do it again. I got another piece down here because I'm pinning my first 2 sets of rows that I just finished. I took the 2 off the design wall and added the other 2. So let me get it over here for you. So here's this is the goose, the next goose. And here's the tip right here. This is my thread. I can actually see, you probably won't be able to see it in the camera, but I can see my thread go right across there. So I put my ruler on it, and then I go out this direction and this direction, and that's what I can sew. I mean, I'll come over this way a little bit because I'm off. I'll come down this way here, like that. And then we don't cut the tips off, and that's what I do every time I come up against the goose. I did it when I sewed this one to this one and this one to this one. Now if you're not a pinner and you're a clipper, you can by all means put a clip on there instead, but I find that I can't do it with the clips. I can't even do my bow cozy with the clips because it ends up making a pleat. The fabric somehow overlaps itself, so I don't even want to bother with that because I don't want to have to keep taking it out and putting it back in. So it's just as well to pin. There we go. And it's just a matter of, I have a lot of bulk up here now because I've got 4 rows of fabric that I got to put up on the table. And then when I'm finished with this row, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the 5th row on the bottom of the 4th down here. And like I said, I'll let you see it. I'm pretty sure my granddaughter will hold it up for me. And I'm holding the left-hand side of the fabric and pushing it on my table so that it's not pulling on my sewing machine. That's why I bumped that a minute ago. It's all right here. You don't want it pulling because it'll break your needle. And if it breaks your thread with your needle will literally pop out. And if you're not wearing glasses or some kind of protective lens, it could hit you in the eye. So you got to be real careful. You don't want to be pulling and pushing and putting any kind of pressure on your needle, not your pen, your needle. Alright, coming up against the goose now. We'll look at it when we're finished here. That's not bunching up on itself there, and and y'all can see everything. All right, we're coming here towards the tail end of it. All right, let's take a look at our noses on the goose. Let me back you up a little bit. All right, there's the first one. It's got a piece of string in there. See, we didn't chop it off. Let's go to the next one. Next one didn't chop it off either. Let's go ahead and we're going to iron it. And remember now, we're ironing it up towards the top, and then we're going to pin that last row on. Let me get this iron and I'm going to hold it up for you. This is how you're supposed to be pressing when you get done and you're putting all these together, because this is relaxing the seam. And then as you note here, the pin mark is gone. The friction pin disappeared. As well as right here, disappeared once you ironed over it. Right there, it's gone. This is what I do before I flip the fabric over. Now, this is the bottom, so I'm going to show you what I do. Because I told you that the seam goes up towards the top. This is the way you make it go to the top. You hold your fabric. And you lift up on it. And then as you push your iron upward, it makes the seam. And I'll show you here in a minute. Let me do a little bit for you. And then you'll see the seam went up. And that's what you want. You're just going to hold it up like that and slowly roll towards the top. The seam again. Just like this. In my case, the ironing board isn't quite long enough. Here we go. So, hold it at the top and slowly push. You can actually feel it, and I'll show it to you here. There you go, and it goes up towards the top. And then that's it. Here it is, and my granddaughter's holding it.
Hello.
This is what it looks like. And you know, if you mix and match them, it's not going to be a problem, you know. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Push the little button so you can subscribe and get notices. And like I said, we're going to do a bow cozy because we're going to learn how to quilt before we quilt this, and I will show you how to quilt it. So I'll see you next time, everybody, and welcome all my new subscribers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.